You need to stop struggling or we will take you down." The officer's voice cracked with adrenaline, his hand hovering over his holster. On the cold tile floor of the airport terminal, a man lay handcuffed, face pressed against the ground. To the passing crowd, he looked like a criminal. But what Officer Vance Keller didn't know was that the man he was humiliating wasn't a thug. He was Master Sergeant Darius Langford, a decorated specialist, returning from a classified deployment. And minutes later, a phone call from the Pentagon was about to turn this officer's world upside down. This is the story of a hero treated like a villain, and the brutal reality check that followed. The automatic doors of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport slid open, hitting Master Sergeant Darius Langford with a wall of humidity that felt entirely different from the dry, dusty heat of Syria. The terminal was a chaotic river of travelers. Businessmen in wrinkled suits checked their watches. Families corralled toddlers on leashes, and the PA system droned on about unattended baggage in a loop that Darius had memorized during his long layover in Germany. Darius adjusted the strap of his duffel bag. It was an olive drab tactical bag, battered and stained with the grease of a C-130 transport plane. But he was dressed in civilian clothes: a gray hoodie, dark denim jeans, and a pair of pristine white sneakers he had bought specifically for this moment. He wasn't wearing his uniform. He didn't want the "thank you for your service" handshakes or the free coffee. He just wanted to disappear into the crowd, get an Uber, and make it to his house in Marietta before his 6-year-old daughter, Chloe, got home from school. He checked his pocket. The small velvet box was still there. Inside was a silver locket with a picture of him and his late wife, Sarah, who had passed years ago. This was the first time he'd been home since the anniversary of her death. The weight of the box felt heavier than the rucksack he was used to carrying. "Excuse me, coming through," a young woman said, clipping his shoulder with a massive pink suitcase. "No worries, ma'am," Darius said, his voice deep and raspy from lack of sleep. He stepped aside with the practiced fluidity of a man trained to be aware of his surroundings at all times. He moved toward the rideshare pickup zone, his eyes scanning the perimeter out of habit. Threat assessment was muscle memory now. Exit points, choke points, security personnel. He noticed 2 police officers standing near column N4. They weren't looking at the traffic. They were looking at the foot traffic, scanning. One of them, a shorter man with a buzz cut and a uniform that looked a size too tight around the biceps, locked eyes with Darius. His name tag read Keller. He was young, with the eager, restless energy of a rookie looking for action in a place where the biggest crime was usually double parking. His partner, an older man with salt and pepper hair named Nolan, leaned against the concrete pillar, looking bored. Darius broke eye contact and kept walking. He had done nothing wrong. He was a Tier 1 operator with the 101st Airborne, a man with top-secret clearance and a record that would make most men tremble. But he also knew the reality of being a black man in a hoodie in America. He squared his shoulders, kept his pace steady, not too fast, not too slow, and focused on the Uber app on his phone. Driver Ahmed, 4 minutes away. "Hey you, gray hoodie." The voice was sharp, cutting through the ambient noise of engines and chatter. Darius stopped. He didn't turn around immediately. He took a breath, the discipline of years in the service kicking in. Calm, compliance, de-escalation. He turned slowly. Officer Keller was walking toward him, one hand resting on his belt near his taser. Nolan was peeling himself off the pillar, following a few steps behind, looking less interested but dutiful. "Is there a problem, officer?" Darius asked. He kept his hands visible, holding his phone loosely in his left hand, his right hand empty and open at his side. Keller stopped 3 feet from him, invading his personal space. Up close, the officer smelled of stale coffee and aggressive cologne. "Where are you coming from?" "International arrivals," Darius said politely. "Just trying to get home to my family." "International, huh?" Keller smirked. "That's a big bag for a short trip. You got a passport?" "I do," Darius said. "It's in my back pocket. I'm going to reach for it now." "Don't move," Keller snapped. The command was loud enough that heads turned. A couple waiting for a Delta flight to Boston stopped loading their trunk to watch. "I didn't ask you to reach for anything yet. I asked if you had it." "And I answered," Darius said, his voice steady, though a flicker of irritation sparked in his chest. "Officer, I've been traveling for hours. I'm tired. If I'm not being detained, I'd like to catch my ride." "You're being detained until I figure out who you are," Keller said, stepping closer. "We've had reports of a suspect matching your description, moving stolen electronics through the terminal. Tall black male, hoodie, large bag. You fit the bill." Darius almost laughed. "Stolen electronics?" "Officer, look at this bag. It's military issue." "Does it look like I'm hauling iPads?" "It looks like a bag that can hold a lot of contraband," Keller countered. "Put the bag on the ground slowly." Nolan finally spoke up, his voice gravelly. "Keller, let's just check his ID and let him go." The description said the guy was wearing a red hat. Keller ignored his partner. He was fixated on Darius. It was a dominance game now. The rookie wanted to prove he could command the situation. Bag on the ground. Now. Darius held Keller's gaze. He saw the insecurity behind the badge. He knew that any sudden movement would give Keller the excuse he was fishing for. Slowly, deliberately, Darius lowered the duffel bag to the concrete. "Turn around," Keller commanded. "Hands on your head, fingers interlaced." "Am I under arrest?" Darius asked, not moving yet. "You're resisting an investigation," Keller said, his voice rising an octave. "Turn around or I will make you turn around." Darius saw Ahmed's Toyota Camry pull up to the curb a few cars down. He saw the driver look at the scene, shake his head, and cancel the ride. The notification pinged on Darius's phone. Ride canceled. That was it. The spark in his chest flared. He had missed his wife's funeral because he was deployed. He wasn't going to miss seeing his daughter today because a rookie cop wanted to flex his authority. "I am a Master Sergeant in the United States Army," Darius said, his voice dropping to that command tone used to direct troops under fire. It wasn't a shout. It was a rumble. "My ID is in my pocket. If you check it, we can all go about our day. But I'm not turning around. And you are not putting cuffs on me for standing on a sidewalk." Keller's face flushed red. The crowd was growing. People had their phones out now. The cameras were rolling. "Last warning," Keller shouted, reaching for his radio. "Dispatch, I have a non-compliant subject at North Terminal arrivals requesting backup." The air around them seemed to thicken, charged with the static of impending violence. The flashing blue lights of a patrol car reflected in the glass doors of the terminal, adding a chaotic strobe effect to the scene. Officer Nolan stepped forward, trying to interject. "Keller, hold on, sir." He addressed Darius. "Just show us the ID. Let's de-escalate this." Darius looked at Nolan, I offered to show him the ID. He told me not to move. Well, I'm telling you now, Nolan said, glancing nervously at the gathering crowd of onlookers. Slowly, take it out. Darius nodded. He moved his hand to his back pocket, moving with agonizing slowness. He pulled out a worn leather wallet. He flipped it open, revealing his common access card, the standard military identification, and his driver's license. He held it out. Keller snatched the wallet from Darius's hand before Nolan could take it. He stared at the military ID, frowning. He flipped it over, then looked back at Darius. "This looks fake," Keller spat. Darius blinked. "Excuse me?" "I've seen military IDs. This chip is scratched to hell. The laminate is peeling at the corner." "Where did you buy this?" "Downtown." Keller's accusation was loud, performative. He was playing to the audience now, trying to justify the scene he had caused. "It's peeling because I've been crawling through sand and debris for months," Darius said, his patience hanging by a thread. "Scan it, run the number. It'll come back to the Pentagon. I don't need to scan a fake ID," Keller said, shoving the wallet into his own pocket. "You're coming with us. We're going to search that bag, and then we're going to process you for possession of forged government documents and resisting arrest." "You have no probable cause to search my bag," Darius stated firmly. He knew the UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice, and he knew civilian law. He had rights. "I do not consent to a search." "I don't need your consent," Keller said, reaching for Darius's wrist. "Stop resisting." It happened in a blur. Keller grabbed Darius's left arm, trying to twist it behind his back in a control hold. It was a sloppy move. Poor technique. Darius didn't strike back. Striking a police officer would end his career and possibly his life. But he didn't yield either. He simply grounded his stance. He was 6'2" and 220 pounds of hardened muscle. Keller pulled, and Darius didn't budge. It was like trying to uproot an oak tree. "Get on the ground!" Keller screamed, panic setting in as he realized he was physically outmatched. He unclipped his taser. "Keller, no!" Nolan shouted, reaching out. "Pop, pop, pop!" The taser prongs hit Darius in the chest. The current surged through him. 50,000 volts designed to override the central nervous system. Darius groaned, his teeth gritting so hard he thought they might crack. His muscles locked up. He fell, but he didn't crumple like a sack of potatoes. He went down to one knee, fighting the electricity, his training screaming at him to stay conscious, to stay in the fight. He hit the pavement, gasping for air. The pain was blinding. "Get his hands! Get his hands!" Keller was on top of him instantly, driving a knee into Darius's back. The weight was nothing compared to the shock, but the indignity burned hotter than the taser probes. Darius felt the cold steel of handcuffs ratcheting tight around his wrists, too tight, cutting off circulation. "You are under arrest." Keller was panting, sweat dripping down his face. He stood up, looking around at the crowd, adrenaline making him jittery. "Back up, everyone. Back the hell up." A woman in the crowd, a nurse wearing scrubs, stepped forward. "He didn't do anything. He showed you his ID. You just tased a veteran." "Back up, lady, or you're next for obstruction," Keller threatened. Darius lay on the concrete, his cheek pressed against the oil-stained pavement. He could see his duffel bag a few feet away. He could see the blurred shoes of the officers. The physical pain was subsiding into a dull throb, but the rage was crystal clear. They took the wallet, he thought. They have the ID. Keller hauled Darius to his feet. Darius stumbled, his legs still rubbery from the voltage. Keller shoved him toward the patrol car. "You made a mistake," Darius whispered. "It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact." "Shut up," Keller said, slamming Darius against the hood of the car. "We'll see who made a mistake when we open that bag and find the stolen goods." Nolan was picking up the duffel bag. He looked worried. "Keller, this bag is heavy. It feels like—" He unzipped the main compartment. Keller left Darius pinned against the car and walked over to look. He expected to see shrink-wrapped iPhones or laptops. Instead, Nolan pulled out a folded American flag. It was a burial flag, the kind draped over coffins. Beneath it was a heavy Kevlar-plated vest with a patch on the front. Langford, U.S. Army, and beneath that a stack of heavily redacted paperwork stamped Top Secret /NOFORN. Nolan's face went pale. He looked at the paperwork, then at the uniform tunics neatly folded at the bottom, adorned with ribbons that indicated valor in combat. "Keller," Nolan hissed. "Look at this." Keller looked. He saw the Silver Star citation sitting on top of the pile. He saw the rank insignia. "So he bought some surplus gear," Keller said, though his voice wavered. "Doesn't mean he's real. People impersonate soldiers all the time." "Keller," Nolan said, holding up a specific document. It was a transfer order. "This isn't surplus. This is dated recently. Signed by General Richard Clark, commander of SOCOM. Nolan looked at Darius, who was standing by the car, watching them with eyes that were cold and dead serious. "We need to run his name," Nolan said, his hands shaking slightly. "For real this time. Dispatch, run a check on Darius Langford, DOB April 12th, 1988. The radio crackled. "Copy 10-4, stand by." The seconds stretched. The crowd was still filming. Keller was pacing, trying to maintain his bravado, but the seed of doubt had been planted. "Dispatch to Unit 4 Alpha." The radio squawked back. The dispatcher's voice sounded different, urgent. "Unit 4 Alpha, be advised. We are getting a flag on that name, a red flag." "What kind of flag?" Keller asked, grabbing the mic. "Is he wanted?" "No," the dispatcher said. "The system is locking us out. It says, contact Department of Defense immediately. We just got a call, patching through from the Provost Marshal's office at Fort Benning. They want to know why you have a high-value asset in handcuffs." Keller froze. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like he was about to faint. Darius, despite the pain in his chest and the cuffs biting into his wrists, stood tall. He looked straight at Keller. "I told you," Darius said, his voice cutting through the silence. "I'm just trying to get home." The sound of a siren, different from a police siren, deeper, more guttural, began to wail in the distance. It was getting louder, fast. Black SUVs with government plates were tearing down the highway toward the terminal. The real drama was just beginning. The silence that followed the dispatcher's ominous warning was heavier than the humid Atlanta air. Officer Keller stood frozen, the radio microphone still clutched in his sweaty palm. The static hiss from the device was the only sound in the immediate vicinity, slicing through the murmur of the crowd that had formed a semicircle around the scene. Darius Langford remained pinned against the hood of the patrol car. The heat from the engine block radiated through his jeans, but a cold fury had settled in his chest, replacing the earlier adrenaline. He watched Keller's reflection in the windshield. He saw the moment the arrogance fractured, replaced by the hollow-eyed look of a man who realizes he has stepped onto a landmine. "What did she mean, Department of Defense?" Keller whispered to Nolan, his voice trembling. "It's a fake ID, right?" "It has to be." Nolan didn't answer. He was staring down the access road. The siren they had heard earlier wasn't a lonely wail anymore. It was a symphony of approaching authority. Traffic in the arrival lane began to part like the Red Sea. Horns blared as cars frantically mounted the curb to get out of the way. 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans, tinted so dark the windows looked like obsidian, roared around the bend. They weren't moving with the cautious urgency of civilian paramedics. They were moving with the aggressive precision of a tactical assault. They screeched to a halt in a V formation, effectively boxing in the police cruiser and blocking the exit. The tires smoked against the asphalt. "Keller, holster your weapon," Nolan hissed, backing away from Darius. "Right now." I can't," Keller stammered. "He's a suspect. I have to maintain control." Before Keller could decide what to do, the doors of the Suburbans flew open in unison. 6 men stepped out. They weren't wearing military fatigues. They were dressed in sharp, charcoal gray suits that struggled to conceal the bulk of body armor underneath. They wore earpieces and dark sunglasses despite the overcast sky. They didn't shout. They didn't run. They moved with a terrifying fluid synchronization. Leading them was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with silver hair cut in a high and tight fade. He wore a suit, but on his lapel was a discreet pin. The eagle, globe, and anchor of the Marine Corps, though he was clearly operating in a joint capacity. This was Colonel Garrett Hayes, a man known in the Pentagon for fixing problems that didn't technically exist. Hayes ignored Keller completely. He walked straight toward Darius, his eyes locking onto the handcuffs. 2 of the other agents in suits moved to flank Keller and Nolan. They didn't draw weapons, but they placed their hands on their waists, pushing back their suit jackets to reveal Sig Sauer sidearms and federal badges clipped to their belts. "Officer," Hayes's voice was low, a deep baritone that carried more authority than Keller's shouting ever could. "You have exactly 5 seconds to explain why a Tier 1 asset is handcuffed like a common criminal on the hood of a police car." Keller swallowed hard. His throat clicked. "Sir, I am Officer Keller, Atlanta PD. This individual was..." He matched a description: suspected theft. He resisted arrest. Hayes stopped 3 feet from Keller. He slowly took off his sunglasses. His eyes were the color of steel and just as hard. "Resisted arrest?" Hayes repeated, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. He looked at Darius. "Sergeant Langford, did you resist?" Darius straightened his back, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at the taser burns on his chest. "Negative, Colonel. I complied with all directives until Officer Keller attempted to assault me without cause. I was tasered while standing still." Hayes turned his gaze back to Keller. It was a look of pure predatory disappointment. "You tasered him?" He wouldn't turn around," Keller squeaked, his defense crumbling. "He had a bag. It looked suspicious." "The bag?" Hayes said, walking over to where the duffel bag lay open on the ground. He looked down at the exposed American flag, the Kevlar vest, and the top-secret documents. He reached down and gently, almost reverently, zipped the bag closed. He handed it to one of his agents. "Secure this. If a single page of those documents has been photographed by this crowd, we are going to have a national security incident that will end with this entire terminal being locked down for a week." He turned back to Keller, stepping into his personal space. Hayes smelled of expensive soap and gunpowder. "That bag," Hayes said quietly, "contains the debriefing materials for Operation Nightshade. Do you know what that is, Officer Keller?" No, sir." "Good. Because if you did, I'd have to detain you for the rest of your natural life," Hayes said. "That man is Master Sergeant Darius Langford. He is a Delta Force operator. He has been in a combat zone for months, dismantling a terror cell that was planning to put a dirty bomb on a subway in New York City. He hasn't slept in days. He missed his wife's funeral years ago to serve this country, and today he just wanted to go home to his daughter." Hayes pointed a finger at Keller's chest. "And you decided to taser him." "I didn't know," Keller pleaded, looking around for support. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. "He didn't identify himself properly. He has a CAC card." Nolan spoke up suddenly, throwing his partner under the bus to save himself. "He offered to show it." Keller refused to look at it until after the cuffs were on. Keller whipped his head around, betrayed. "Nolan!" Hayes held out his hand. "The key, now." Keller fumbled at his belt. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped the keys on the asphalt. The clatter rang out like a gunshot. One of the agents stepped forward, picked up the keys, and handed them to Hayes. The colonel walked over to Darius. He didn't just unlock the cuffs. He placed a hand on Darius's shoulder. "I am sorry, son," Hayes said softly, his voice losing its edge for just a moment. "This shouldn't have happened." The cuffs clicked open. Darius rubbed his raw wrists. The circulation rushed back, bringing a fresh wave of stinging pain. "I'm fine, Colonel," Darius said, his voice raspy. "I just want to see Chloe." "We'll get you to her," Hayes promised. "But first, we need to deal with this mess." At that moment, a second wave of sirens wailed. An Atlanta PD supervisor's car pulled up, followed by an ambulance. Captain Henderson, a thick-set man with a weary face, climbed out of the supervisor's car. He looked at the black SUVs, the federal agents, and his own terrified officers. He knew immediately that his day had gone from bad to catastrophic. "What is going on here?" Henderson boomed, trying to assert local authority. Hayes turned to face the captain. He didn't salute. He didn't smile. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a phone. "Captain," Hayes said, "I suggest you don't speak until you answer this." He held out the phone. "Who is it?" Henderson asked, eyeing the device suspiciously. "It's the Secretary of the Army," Hayes said calmly, "and he is on a conference line with the governor of Georgia. They would like to know why Atlanta PD is assaulting a Congressional Medal of Honor nominee." The airport terminal manager had opened up a VIP lounge usually reserved for foreign diplomats, but the luxury of the room, the plush leather chairs, the abstract art, the panoramic view of the runway, felt suffocatingly tense. The air conditioning was humming, but Officer Keller was sweating through his uniform shirt. The room had been commandeered. The glass doors were guarded by two of Hayes's agents. Inside, the dynamic had shifted from a public spectacle to a private inquisition. Darius sat on a leather sofa, a paramedic kneeling beside him. The medic, A young woman with a gentle touch was applying conductive gel to the burns on his chest, where the taser prongs had pierced the skin. BP is elevated, heart rate is elevated. He's dehydrated, Colonel, and there's significant bruising on his lumbar spine from the knee drop. Darius waved her off. I'm fine, ma'am, thank you. Just give me a bottle of water. Colonel Hayes stood by the window, his back to the room, watching a Delta jet taxi toward the runway. Captain Henderson stood near the door, looking pale. Keller and Nolan sat on folding chairs in the corner, stripped of their belts and weapons, looking like schoolboys waiting for the principal's axe to fall. Hayes turned around. The silence in the room was absolute. Captain Henderson, Hayes began, his voice deceptively calm. Do you know the logistical nightmare involved in extracting Sergeant Langford from Syria? No, Colonel, Henderson said, wringing his hands. We had to route him through multiple non-permissive countries. We used a cargo plane, a fishing trawler, and a commercial flight under an alias until he reached Germany. We did all that to keep his identity secure, to keep a target off his back. Hayes walked over to the coffee table and picked up Darius's battered wallet, which lay there as evidence. And in minutes, your officer managed to expose his face, his rank, and his location to hundreds of people with smartphones. That video is already online. It has millions of views. Keller looked up, tears of frustration and fear welling in his eyes. I was just doing my job. He looked like a drug mule. How was I supposed to know he was this? Darius took a long sip of water. He set the bottle down and looked at Keller. For the first time, he spoke to the man not as a victim, but as a superior. You weren't supposed to know who I was, Keller, Darius said. The depth of his voice seemed to rattle the glass tables. You were supposed to treat me like a human being. That's the job. You swore an oath to protect and serve, not to profile and punish. I thought you had a weapon, Keller lied, his voice cracking. I did, Darius said. I am the weapon. If I wanted to hurt you, Officer Keller, you wouldn't have had time to unholster that taser. But I didn't. I stood there. I let you humiliate me, because unlike you, I know the consequences of violence. Hayes nodded. Captain Henderson, I am taking custody of Sergeant Langford and all evidence collected, including the body cam footage from both your officers. Now wait a minute, Henderson bristled, and trying to salvage some dignity. This is still a police matter. We have procedures. You can't just take our evidence. Hayes laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Captain, let me be clear. This isn't a police matter anymore. This is a federal inquiry under the Patriot Act and the National Security Act. I am classifying this entire incident. He walked over to Keller. Officer Keller, you are going to be placed on administrative leave effective immediately. But don't plan a vacation. You will be hearing from the JAG Corps. We are filing charges for assault on a federal officer, unlawful detention, and since you damaged government property when you kicked his tactical bag, destruction of classified material. Keller slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hands. And you? Hayes looked at Nolan. You knew better. You saw the ID. You saw the situation escalating and you did nothing. Silence is complicity, officer. You're lucky if you keep your pension. Nolan looked at the floor, shame burning his ears. Hayes turned back to Darius. Sergeant, the car is ready. We're taking you to Dobbins Air Reserve Base first. The doctors there need to document the injuries for the inquiry. Then I'm driving you to Marietta myself. Darius stood up. He was stiff, his body aching, but he moved with dignity. He picked up his duffel bag, which the agents had returned to him. "Colonel," Darius said, "one request." "Name it." "I don't want the video taken down," Darius said. The room went silent. Captain Henderson looked confused. "What? Why? It makes us look terrible." "Exactly," Darius said. "And it shows the truth. If you scrub it, it looks like a cover-up. Leave it up. Let people see what happened. Let them see that a uniform doesn't make you a hero and a hoodie doesn't make you a criminal." Hayes smiled, a genuine expression of respect. "Done. Let's go home, son." They walked out of the VIP lounge, leaving the 3 police officers sitting in the wreckage of their careers. But as they moved through the terminal toward the private exit, Darius's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. It was a text from his sister-in-law who was watching Chloe. "Darius, where are you? Chloe is crying. She says she feels like something is wrong. Please hurry." Darius's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just a "miss you" text. The wording was specific. She feels like something is wrong. Chloe had always had an intuition, a connection to him that defied logic. But there was something else. A second text came through immediately after. "Also, there's a strange car parked across the street. Dark sedan, windows tinted. It's been there for an hour." Darius stopped dead in his tracks. The blood that had just returned to his face drained away. "Colonel?" Darius said, his voice tight. "What is it?" Hayes asked, sensing the shift in Darius's demeanor. "We need to move now." Darius showed him the phone. "The cell I dismantled in Syria. They weren't working alone. We thought we got them all, but the leader, Malik, was never found." Hayes read the text. His eyes widened. "You think they tracked you?" Hayes asked. "I think the red flag on my name wasn't just because of my rank," Darius said, his mind racing. "It was a warning. I'm not just an asset, Colonel. I'm a target. And if they know I'm here, then they know where my family is." Hayes finished the sentence. The colonel tapped his earpiece. "All units, Code 3 to Marietta. We are moving to the primary residence. Threat level is critical. I repeat, threat level is critical. Get the bird in the air. We might need air support." The drama at the airport was over. The war had just followed Darius home. The convoy of black Suburbans tore down Interstate 75, moving with a velocity that blurred the Georgia landscape into streaks of green and gray. Inside the lead vehicle, the atmosphere was a pressurized chamber of calculated aggression. There was no radio music, no small talk, only the hum of the engine pushing high speed and the clipped, static-laced chatter of tactical coordination. Darius sat in the back seat, his body rigid. He had removed the gray hoodie, revealing a black t-shirt that clung to his muscular frame. He was checking the slide of a Glock 19 that Colonel Hayes had pulled from a lockbox between the seats. Darius didn't ask for permission. He just took it. Hayes didn't object. When you are rushing toward a house where a terrorist might be holding your 6-year-old daughter, protocols about civilians carrying firearms cease to exist. "ETA minutes," the driver announced, his eyes glued to the road as he weaved through traffic, the siren clearing a path like a snowplow. "Too long," Darius muttered. He stared at his phone. He had tried calling Beatrice, his sister-in-law, multiple times. All went to voicemail. Hayes sat next to him, tapping furiously on a tablet. We have a drone from Dobbins diverting to your sector. It'll be eyes on soon. We're tapping into the traffic cams at the entrance of your subdivision." "Who is it, Colonel?" Darius asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Who leaked my location?" Hayes sighed, a heavy sound that seemed to age him years in a second. "It wasn't a leak, Darius. It was a lapse. When Officer Keller ran your name through the local NCIC database, the system flagged a do not detain order, but because the system is outdated, it pinged a server in DC. We believe Viktor Volkov has a tap on that specific server node." Darius's grip on the pistol tightened until his knuckles turned white. "Volkov, the Chechen, the same?" Hayes nodded grimly. "We thought he died in the airstrike in Aleppo. Intelligence was wrong. He's been hunting the team that took out his brother. He's not here for ideology, Darius. He's here for blood." The irony washed over Darius, bitter and acrid. He had survived months of hell, dodging IEDs and snipers, only to be exposed by a bored, prejudiced cop in an Atlanta airport. If Keller hadn't stopped him, if Keller hadn't felt the need to flex his power on a black man in a hoodie, Darius would have been home earlier. He would have been there to meet Chloe at the bus stop. "Officer Keller," Darius said, staring out the window. "Does he know?" "He's in the car behind us," Hayes said. "Captain Henderson ordered him to join the perimeter team. He needs to see the consequences of his routine stop." The driver shouted back, "Colonel, we have a visual from the drone. One vehicle in the driveway, black sedan. Thermal imaging shows heat signatures inside the house. 2 stationary, 1 moving." 2 stationary. Darius's heart hammered against his ribs. Chloe, Beatrice, and the mover. "Pacing in the living room," the driver confirmed. "He's waiting," Darius whispered. "He knows I'm coming. He wants a show." Hayes grabbed the radio handset. "All units, kill the sirens. I repeat, kill sirens. We go in silent from the perimeter. I don't want to spook him into executing the hostages. Establish a cordon. No one in or out." The wailing sirens died instantly. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the noise. The convoy slowed as they exited the highway, gliding like sharks into the quiet, tree-lined streets of Marietta. This was the neighborhood Darius had chosen for its safety. It was a place of manicured lawns, brick mailboxes, and basketball hoops and driveways. It was the American dream he fought to protect. Now, as the black SUVs rolled past a woman walking a golden retriever, the juxtaposition of domestic peace and impending violence was jarring. They turned the corner onto Oakwood Drive. "Stop here," Darius commanded. The SUV halted a few houses down from his own. It was a 2-story colonial with white shutters and a porch swing, a swing he had built with his own hands before he deployed. The black sedan was there just as Beatrice had texted. It sat in the driveway, ominous and out of place. The engine was off, but Darius could practically smell the malice radiating from it. Darius opened the door and stepped out. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and honeysuckle. He checked the chamber of the Glock one last time. "Darius," Hayes said, stepping out beside him. "We do this by the book. My team takes the rear. You and I take the front. We breach on my signal." "No," Darius said. He didn't look at the colonel. His eyes were fixed on the front window of his home, where the curtains were drawn tight. "He's in my house. He has my little girl. The book doesn't apply here. I'm going to the front door." "That's suicide," Hayes warned. "No," Darius turned, his eyes burning with a controlled, terrifying intensity. "It's a distraction. He wants me. If he sees me, he focuses on me. That gives your team the window to breach the back and secure Chloe." Hayes hesitated, then nodded. He knew better than to argue with a father who was also a Tier 1 operator. "Go. We'll be in position soon." Darius began the longest walk of his life. He walked down the center of the street openly, his weapon held down by his thigh. He wasn't hiding. He was the bait. The gravel of the driveway crunched softly under Darius's sneakers. The same white sneakers Officer Keller had sneered at earlier. Every sense in Darius's body was dialed up to maximum sensitivity. He could hear the wind rustling the oak leaves. He could hear the distant hum of a lawnmower. He could hear the blood rushing in his own ears. He reached the front porch. The welcome mat, which read "Home Sweet Home," was crooked. A red plastic cup, likely Chloe's, was overturned on the porch railing, dripping apple juice onto the wood. The signs of intrusion were subtle, but to Darius, they were screaming. The front door was unlocked. The deadbolt wasn't engaged. He didn't knock. He didn't kick the door down. He turned the handle slowly, ghostly quiet, and pushed. The door creaked just a fraction. "I know you are there, Sergeant Langford." The voice came from the living room. It was thick, accented, and calm. It was the voice of a man who checked his pulse while he killed. Darius pushed the door open fully and stepped into the foyer. The house was dim. The blinds were pulled, casting stripes of shadow across the hardwood floor. In the center of the living room, sitting in Darius's favorite armchair, was Viktor Volkov. He was a gaunt man with a scarred face and eyes that looked like dead fish. He held a suppressed pistol in his right hand, and on the floor, huddled near the fireplace, were Beatrice and Chloe. Beatrice was weeping silently, her arms wrapped tight around Chloe's head, pressing the girl's face into her chest so she couldn't see the gunman. Chloe was shaking, her small body vibrating with terror. "Daddy," Chloe's muffled voice came from Beatrice's embrace. "It's okay, baby," Darius said, his voice steady and soothing, contrasting with the gun in his hand. "Daddy's here. Close your eyes and count to 100 for me. Can you do that?" Volkov smiled. It was a grotesque expression. "A touching reunion. You look tired, Darius. The flight was long." "Let them go, Victor," Darius said, raising his weapon but keeping it pointed at Volkov's chest. "This is between you and me. You want the man who killed your brother? I'm right here." "I know you are here, Volkov," Darius said lazily. He didn't seem worried about the gun pointed at him. "But if you shoot me, my reflex pulls this trigger. And my aim, well, you know my aim is excellent." He shifted the suppressor. It was pointed directly at Beatrice's spine. "Why?" Darius asked, stepping inch by inch into the room, trying to change the angle, trying to find a shot that wouldn't risk his family. "You're a professional. This is personal. It's sloppy." "Sloppy?" Volkov laughed. "No, this is precise. You Americans, you come to my country, you drop bombs from the sky, you kill my blood, and then you fly home to your suburbs and watch football. You think the war stays there. I am here to show you that the war has no borders." "You're right," Darius said. "The war followed me, but you made a mistake." "And what is that?" "You waited too long," Darius said. "You waited for me to get home." Darius's eyes flicked to the hallway mirror behind Volkov. In the reflection, he saw a shadow move in the kitchen doorway. It was Hayes's lead tactical officer, Agent Reynolds. He had a suppressed MP5 raised, but Volkov saw Darius's eyes move. "Don't!" Volkov screamed, swinging his weapon toward the kitchen. The room exploded into chaos. Darius didn't shoot Volkov. He dove. He launched himself across the room, a blur of motion, throwing his body over Beatrice and Chloe just as Volkov fired. Thip, thip. 2 bullets tore into the drywall, inches above where the family had been huddled. Plaster dust rained down. Simultaneously, the kitchen erupted. Agent Reynolds fired a 3-round burst. Volkov was fast. He rolled off the chair, taking a hit to the shoulder, but staying mobile. He scrambled behind the heavy oak sofa, firing blindly back toward the kitchen. "Stay down," Darius roared to Beatrice. He was on top of them, a human shield. He could feel Chloe screaming beneath him, though he couldn't hear it over the gunfire. Darius rolled off his family, transitioning from protector to predator. He was in a prone position on the floor. He had a line of sight under the sofa. He could see Volkov's boots. He didn't hesitate. He fired 2 rounds through the bottom of the sofa, aiming upward. Volkov yelled, a guttural sound of pain. The Chechen mercenary popped up from behind the couch, desperate, trying to acquire a target. His face was a mask of blood and rage. He raised his gun toward Darius, but he was too slow. The front window shattered inward as Colonel Hayes, who had remained on the porch, fired a single shot from his sidearm through the glass. The bullet struck Volkov in the chest. The impact threw him backward, crashing into the bookshelf. Books, vases, and framed photos of Darius and his late wife cascaded down, burying the killer in the memories of the family he tried to destroy. Volkov twitched once, then went still. "Clear," Agent Reynolds shouted from the kitchen, sweeping the room. "Subject down. Secure." Darius didn't care about clear. He dropped his gun and scrambled back to the huddle on the floor. "Chloe, Beatrice." Beatrice looked up, her face streaked with mascara and tears, but she nodded. She was unharmed. Darius pulled Chloe from Beatrice's arms. The little girl was hyperventilating, her eyes wide with shock. "Daddy!" she screamed, clinging to his neck with a grip that felt like it would never let go. "I've got you," Darius whispered, burying his face in her hair. He smelled the strawberry shampoo she used. He felt her small heart beating like a trapped bird against his chest. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, finally spilled from his eyes. "I've got you. He can't hurt you, I promise." Hayes stepped through the broken front door, his gun holstered. He looked at the body of Volkov, then at the father holding his daughter. He signaled to his team to wait outside. He gave them the moment. Outside on the street, the flashing blue lights of the police cruisers had finally been allowed to turn on. The perimeter was secure, and standing by the police tape, watching the paramedics rush toward the house, was Officer Keller. He wasn't wearing his badge anymore. Captain Henderson had taken it. Keller watched as the door opened. He saw Colonel Hayes step out, followed by Darius Langford. Darius was carrying his daughter in his arms. He looked exhausted, battered, and covered in drywall dust. But he looked unbroken. As Darius walked toward the ambulance, his eyes met Keller's across the yard. Keller expected hate. He expected anger, but Darius just looked at him with a weary pity. He nodded once, a gesture that said, "I survived, and you have to live with what you almost caused." Keller turned away, unable to hold the gaze of the man he had called a criminal. He walked toward his own car, head down, as the neighbors began to come out of their houses, witnessing the hero in their midst. The flashing lights of the emergency vehicles painted the twilight in rhythmic bursts of red and blue. The quiet cul-de-sac of Oakwood Drive had become a national news site. News helicopters circled overhead, their rotors thumping against the darkening sky, filming the scene where a Delta Force operator had defended his home against a ghost from his past. Master Sergeant Darius Langford sat on the bumper of an ambulance, a gray wool blanket draped over his shoulders. Chloe was asleep in his lap, exhausted by the adrenaline crash, clutching the silver locket that Darius had finally been able to give her. Colonel Hayes walked over holding 2 cups of lukewarm coffee. He handed one to Darius. "It's done," Hayes said quietly. "The cleanup crew is inside. The official story is a botched home invasion. We're keeping Volkov's name out of the papers. The last thing we need is a panic." "And Keller?" Darius asked, looking past the yellow police tape where the former officer sat in the back of a squad car, head in his hands. "Captain Henderson just briefed the press," Hayes replied, taking a sip of coffee. "Keller has been fired, effective immediately. He's facing charges for civil rights violations and assault. The video of him tasing you has millions of views. Darius, the world knows exactly who he is, and more importantly, they know who you are." Darius looked down at his daughter. He brushed a stray curl from her forehead. "I don't care about the world, Colonel. I just care about her." Weeks later, the chaos had subsided into a quiet reverence. Darius stood in the east room of the White House. He was no longer in a hoodie and jeans. He was wearing his dress blues, the fabric crisp and immaculate. On his chest, the ribbons formed a colorful mosaic of sacrifice. The President of the United States stood beside him, reading from a citation. The room was filled with generals, senators, and cameras, but Darius's eyes were locked on the front row. There, sitting next to Beatrice, was Chloe. She was wearing a blue dress and smiling, waving a tiny American flag. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty, the President intoned. As the Medal of Honor was placed around his neck, Darius didn't feel the weight of the medal. He felt the weight of the journey. He thought about the sand in Syria. He thought about the cold floor of the airport terminal. He thought about the voltage of the taser and the fear in his daughter's eyes. He realized that the battle wasn't just fought overseas. It was fought in the assumptions people made, in the biases they held, and in the moments where dignity was tested by ignorance. After the ceremony, away from the cameras, Colonel Hayes shook his hand. "Ready to go back to work, Sergeant?" Hayes asked. Darius looked at Chloe, who was running toward him across the polished floor. He scooped her up, the Medal of Honor clinking against her buttons. "Not yet, Colonel." Darius smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. "I've got some time to make up. I'm taking the long way home." Darius Langford's story is a brutal reminder that a hero doesn't always look the way we expect them to. In a single afternoon, he went from being treated like a criminal to being revealed as one of the nation's deadliest and most decorated protectors. But the tragedy is that he shouldn't have needed a Medal of Honor or a classified file to be treated with basic human dignity. Officer Keller saw a threat because he refused to see a man. He let his prejudice blind him to the truth, and it cost him his career. Darius Langford proved that true power isn't about raising your voice or demanding authority. It's about having the discipline to stay calm when the world tries to break you, and the strength to protect what matters most when the war comes to your doorstep. What would you have done if you were in Darius's shoes at that airport? Do you think justice was served for Officer Keller? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story about real-life heroes, justice, and the twists you never see coming. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.